know the name Doug Poppa?
Yes, I do. God bless Doug Poppa, an honest cop.
I was elated, of course, but then as he testified, I was somewhat concerned for him because I knew that they were probably going to crucify that man.
The top cop who put his badge on the line for justice.
Sometimes the truth has a price. That may be the lesson of a Virginia police officer who says in trying to do the right thing, he ended up paying for it. Of one man who confronted truth and consequences.
From Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Doug Poppa, Truth and Consequences Podcast. Good afternoon from Las Vegas, Nevada. This is episode 87 for Thursday, January 27th, 2022. Let's go back to October 27th, 2016. The bodies of Sidney Land and Nehemiah Kauffman were found, both shot in the head, inside their southwest Las Vegas apartment. The double homicide is now over 5 years unsolved. Allegations of police corruption, a cover-up, negligence, and incompetence have surrounded the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department's investigation into the unsolved murders of Sidney Land and Nehemiah Kauffman. On the line today, in an exclusive double interview, are Alethea Kauffman and Connie Land, the mothers of Nehemiah Kauffman and Sidney Land, two mothers united in tragedy, fighting for justice for their murdered children. Welcome to the show, ladies. How you doing today?
Good. How are you, Doug?
Hi, Doug.
Hello, Alethea and Connie. Again, I know Connie, we talked many times in the past. Alethea, we talked the other day on the podcast. Again, my condolences. I know it's troubling when we talk about your son and your daughter, Connie's, bodies being found on October 27th. But this is an unsolved double homicide over 5 years. Past October was the 5-year anniversary. I want to start with you, Alethea, and Connie. Both of you can jump in at any time. What do you want to say, Alethea? You have the opportunity here. I know we talked last week. It wasn't that long, but tell me how you're feeling inside. And I know that's a pretty insensitive question, but how do you feel?
I mean, this is something that I've held on for 5 years, and I didn't speak openly or publicly about it. And now that we're, going on the 6-year mark, which is so tragic to me and disgusting to me, that we're left here with no answers. And I just feel like it's time that, our kids get the truth, we get the truth, we get justice, and that, what has happened to both of our families doesn't occur or happen to anybody else's family. I mean, Connie and I have suffered and gone through a lot of obstacles, a lot of deceptions, lies, manipulation, a lot of backbiting, and trying to pit families against families. And who does that in the police department? Well, Metropolitan Police Department does, a bit, obviously. And now that we're like, she and I are forever bonded, forever linked in the most way imaginable. And there's no words to put into what we feel and go through on a daily basis. I mean, that's where I'm at this point. I want our kids and our families to have some type of closure. We're not going to completely get closure because we'll never have our kids with us again.
Right.
So, but to hold people accountable for their actions and conducts. And, that's what I want to see happen. Something.
You've had many conversations with Detective Jared Grimmett over the years. We talked the other day. And
yeah.
Can you just briefly, Alethea, let's go over what they told you back in September of 2021, and I believe the conversation you had was with Detective Dorsch first, and the sergeant, who I believe was Michael Fletcher.
That's Fletcher. Um, Basically, I mean, you know, it was a dog and pony show. They felt like, well, you know what? We're just going to give her little bits and tidbits and pieces and, you know, give her just enough so she'll just go away. And they thought that was going to appease me with the dog and pony show and the smoke screen and just a lot of things. They dropped huge bombshells that I'm just sitting there hearing for the first time in 5 years that I'm like, are you serious? This is really? I mean, I'm floored. And I feel betrayed because, you know, honestly, I didn't speak because I wasn't at that place to be able to speak openly and publicly because, you know, my emotions, you know, I didn't want to come off wrong,
Right.
you know, and being the proverbial grieving mother. And, you know, I just didn't speak on it.
They
But
told,
then,
excuse me,
uh-huh.
they told you that the crime scene on October 27th, 2016 was compromised by the crime scene analyst because he didn't have the protective gear on and contaminated the crime scene. That's what they told you, correct?
Yeah, he got fired. He got dismissed from the crime scene Metropolitan Police Department. Yes, because it was compromised. Not only that, why do you have nobody can tell me who the high-ranking officials were that showed their butts up to when our kids' bodies were found? I mean, like I said, it was a three-ring circus that day. It just floors me. The mishandling, the incompetence, the cover-up, the bullshit from day one. And now it feels good to get this out because I've been holding this shit in for the past 5 years and just angry and frustrated. And I'm sorry, everybody, please forgive me. It's just a raw emotion that's coming out. But I've been holding this in. And I tried to give the police department, you know, to see what they were going to do. And 5 years. And so when that 5-year mark came up, I'm okay, time is up. So what are you all bringing to the table about this investigation? What are you all doing? Nothing but a dog and pony show. Then you want to bring in the Detective Grimmett, as we call him, the closer. They always bring him in at the last minute. He comes in, he's the closer. He closes out, you know, the meetings. Now, I've only met with Metropolitan Police Department twice in their office, and once when they came to my home on October 29th, 2016. Okay. So, yeah. And it's been nothing but a dog and pony show. They don't call to give you any updates. You have to hound them, call them, pursue them. That's not how it works.
Right. You don't have to apologize for your frustration and your anger. That's you don't owe anybody any apologies for that. Neither of you two mothers. And something else I want to talk about. They also told you back in September 21 that another piece of evidence, and you don't have to go into the details because people can listen to the prior podcast. It's podcast 83 when these revelations came out over the past weekend. But there was another piece of evidence, and that's what it was, a piece of evidence. And not technically, it is, that piece of evidence where it was found is another crime scene because it was attached to related to the crime scene in the apartment. And that bag of marijuana, they told you, was never analyzed. They also told you that only 10 pieces of items were sent in for DNA analysis. And that just floored me, Alethea. That's
because where did they do that at? How do you systematically go through a crime scene and by just a glance or a look at an eye and say, you know what, that looks like that could be something, or eeny, meeny, miny, mo, that looks like that could be something. How do you systematically not go through and collect everything that could have some type of value and evidence, something, but you guys are only allowed it to pick out 10 fucking where do you do that at? Well, the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department does that.
Doug, they're so full of shit. They
Connie, let me say something on that because I want people to understand something. And I'm a former criminal investigator. I've been out of police work for over 30 years, and I know there are techniques in evidence collection and analysis that they have now that they didn't have back when I was on the department. But crime scene preservation of a crime scene, that's most important. Those haven't changed. They haven't changed for decades. Though there are certain rules and policies that you follow. Now, they told you that they didn't they only analyzed 10 pieces of evidence that they collected. Now, I hope to God they collected everything inside that apartment, even if they didn't analyze all of it.
Everything, only 10 items. So they're systematically, so basically what they picked and choose what they wanted to test it, and then what they felt, and then when, they wanted to say to me about Lombardo getting upset about the fact about the heat coming on this case, about the evidence, DNA evidence and stuff from the crime scene being processed, I'm just like, well, wait a minute. You guys were saying one thing, and then you're telling me about Lombardo, like, which one is it?
Yeah. Well,
he wasn't happy about it. They were getting a lot of heat about what's going on. And so I'm just looking at them like, well, so you're trying to tell me that in the state of Nevada, you guys can only pick out 10 items. How do you determine which item is relevant and which one is irrelevant? How do you determine that? And then especially if they're trying to make it seem like our kids' house was a freaking Animal House. And if anybody, knows what Animal House, the movie is, they try to make it seem like it was a party frat house and they had people in and out of there all days and hours of the night. And they just had cups and stuff just everywhere, cigarette butts and ash. No, absolutely not.
Alethea, and I want to say this just for the listeners, because we do not have, and I mean we, the families, your family, Alethea, and Connie's family, we don't have any of the investigative reports. You don't have any of the reports that were done by the crime scene analyst. You don't have the crime scene photographs, and we'll get into that in a second because of what they did on Crime Watch Daily was a freaking disgrace. But I have to believe, and I hate to say this because the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, and I've exposed this in multiple stories and more stories that will be coming out in the future, have a very serious credibility problem when it comes into investigations. We've had detectives who've lied and provided false information to judges and search warrants that led to people actually being arrested for crimes they weren't. They lie in police reports. And the problem I got with this is this. When they told you that they only can analyze 10 items for DNA evidence found at a double homicide, I'm telling you again, I said this on a podcast the other day, I've spoken to police officials and both current and retired on the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department who told me that statement is absurd. That in a double homicide, or any homicide, there is no limit on the amount of evidence that can be submitted for analysis. On minor crimes, yes, because it overloads the lab, but not on a homicide and specifically. Now, I want to say this. When they told you that they only analyzed 10 pieces of evidence, I hope to God that they collected all the evidence in the house, even if they didn't analyze all of it for some unknown reason, because any cup, any cigarette butt, anything where somebody touched could have their DNA evidence on it, and other items, including those items, may also have fingerprints. Anything found at a crime scene, is evidence that needs to be analyzed. And the two biggest things are the bodies of the people who were murdered. You have fibers on the carpet. There's a thing that goes back in crime scene and investigations, goes back many, many years. And I'm not pronouncing the name of the person right. I think it's the Laura principle. Basically, it's the theory of exchange and delivery. Whatever a person brings into a crime scene, he leaves something and he takes something out. So there could be evidence on the bodies of Nehemiah and Sidney, depending on how and the way they were killed, that may be linked to the persons who did it. But going back to these 10 items that they only submitted to the lab, I'm telling you right now, if indeed that is what they did on this double homicide, they are the most incompetent and negligent police department that I ever heard of. Because detectives that I have spoken to told me on a homicide, they've submitted hundreds of pieces of evidence for analysis, whether that analysis is fingerprints, DNA, semen, or whatever. That's what goes in. So that was troubling in and of itself. And the other thing was troubling is they didn't analyze the evidence that was found outside the apartment. And then
but I'm just saying that you should have tested everything, whether you thought it was huge or just even the smallest minor thing, because a lot of times it's the smallest piece of evidence that you would not even think that would be the smoking gun, that sometimes is the smoking gun that breaks wide open cold cases and different things. But I'm just saying, to collect they should collect everything and tested everything. And then, for DNA, because you know what, some of their associates that our children, were associated with, you know what I'm saying? I use that very loosely, association. I'm being nice saying that, trying to keep it clean. But a lot of them have their DNA profiles in the CODIS system for the penal system.
Absolutely.
Right. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So why wouldn't you not want to test every single piece and put it through the CODIS system? Because you may get a hit. You don't know.
Well, let's just go back to
Well, let me say something, Connie, before you get to that, because this is important. If indeed, and we're going to get to the bottom of this, because what happened with the revelations that they told Alethea back in September, what they told you, Alethea, it opens up the door for a lot of legal maneuvers that need to be done in this case outside of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. Because if indeed their records show that they only submitted 10 items, which would be a fraction of the evidence that should have been submitted to a lab, there's something wrong with, well, we know there's something wrong with this case, but this makes it even worse and more troubling. The other thing I want to say, so people listening, ladies and gentlemen, listen to this. Every police officer, when you graduate from the police academy, a recruit just out of the academy knows you do not go into a crime scene unless you have a valid reason for being in there. People who go into the crime scene are the investigating detectives and the crime scene analysts. That is it. Cops show up, deputy chief, whoever they are, say, I want to go in and take a look. Absolutely not. Now, if they did not follow procedure, somewhere in the file of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, in this homicide, double homicide file, should be, I don't know what they call it in Metro, a roster or a log as to one officer's job when you get there, and he's delegated to that, is you log in the date, the time, and the person going in and the reason, whether it's an EMT going in to make sure the people are dead, the time they came out, what detectives are going in there. That is a roster that is kept.
The medical examiner, the ME that goes in.
Anybody that goes in there, the time they go in and the time they go out, that is a log that is kept, because that is crucial if there's a prosecution down the road, because all this stuff is discovery. And attorneys for the suspects, we got some jets going over, so you may hear that in the background. It's not thunder. The attorneys for the suspects get all this information on discovery if anybody's ever arrested for a homicide. So what they told you back in September, if indeed true, is very, very, very troubling. And then it takes away our theory that there was negligence and incompetence, because there was, based on what they told you. Now, for 5 years, Sheriff Lombardo, and I say Sheriff Lombardo, he is the leader of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. It all falls back on his shoulder, as it does with all his commanders, all the way up from under sheriff all the way down. Okay? If 5 years they did not tell you or the Land family that there was the cover-up that they initiated to keep it quiet, that crime scene was compromised. Okay? Compromising the crime scene affects anything else you do in that investigation, because attorneys would have a field day with that. So as far as the crime scene is concerned, from what we know right now, and I use the word botched lightly, the crime scene was botched. It is a disgrace. I know, Connie, you want to say something. Just go ahead and I'll be quiet.
Go ahead.
You know, I said from the very beginning, this case was ruined and damaged before the murders even happened. The day that Shane Valentine went over and shot into the Kauffman residence and they didn't retrieve the bullet, that started it. So there was incompetence and negligence right out of the gate before the kids were murdered. They didn't pull the bullet out. And it wasn't one bullet. Alethea said there was more than one bullet that was shot into the house.
Yeah,
so you start with that. I can tell you that a friend of ours, he was on the gang unit. Gang was in the apartment that day. They were in that room, in the apartment. Vice was in the apartment. Homicide was in the apartment. I don't know if there's a drug unit, but there were all sorts of people in and out of that apartment. No wonder there was, and then you have a crime scene analyst that is not wearing proper protection to gather the crime scene and the evidence. No wonder they didn't waste any money or waste time doing any testing. They fucked the case up and they knew it. And there's probably no surprise. You've got Ty Bowden and Allie Bowden that are brought in for questioning 8 hours before the murder happened. You've got a cop and his daughter, who's a prostitute, for Neo, brought in 8 hours before the murders happened.
Okay, let me stop there for a second, because I want to get this clear. According to Judge DeBiasen, okay, that's what she said. Judge DeBiasen said, and she was receiving information from Detective Jared Grimmett, and I covered that in the last couple of podcasts and in many podcasts and stories that I wrote for the Baltimore Post-Examiner. Judge DeBiasen said that Allie Bowden, the daughter of Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department police officer Clarence, nicknamed Ty Bowden, was at one time a prostitute who had worked for Shane Valentine, and then before the murders at some time, this is what Judge DeBiasen said, not Connie Land, not Doug Poppa, Judge DeBiasen, that she switched and was working for Nehemiah Kauffman. And then she further said that text messages, of course, she's getting all this information, she said, from Grimmett. After the murders, they got a hold of Neo's cell phone, and they had text messages that confirmed that indeed Allie Bowden had a prostitution-related relationship with Neo. Okay, this bothered me and bothers me to this day, because in addition to that, Judge DeBiasen came out of her mouth, and you people can listen to that in episode 39 of my podcast. Her entire interview, unredacted, unedited, is there. She said that her getting outed by Vice Detective Justine Gaddis to Ty Bowden and his daughter Allie, she was outed as a confidential source of information to Vice. She said 8 hours later, that meeting happened about 4:30, she said, in the afternoon on October 25th. She said 8 hours later, on October 26th, this is exactly out of her mouth, at 12:30 a.m., 3 people who she identified as Shane Valentine, Dominique Thompson, and Frankie Zappia, her own words, executed Neo and Sidney. Now, I can only assume, and I hate to assume, but she said this information was given to her by homicide detective Jared Grimmett. And she said further that the wrong 2 people got killed, that it was meant to be her and her daughter, not Sidney and Neo. And the murders happened because sometime in the middle of the night, Allie Bowden was over her house with her daughter Sarah DeBiasen, who was also friends with Neo, according to the judge. Sometime in the middle of the night, Judge DeBiasen said to me, and I say judge, she resigned under, she resigned. She had to resign last year. So she's a former judge. But when she was talking to me on the record, she was still a sitting Las Vegas Justice Court judge. She said that sometime in the middle of the night, Allie Bowden left her house, put out a tweet that she was called in earlier and interviewed by Vice, and Judge DeBiasen said that led to the murders of Sidney Land and Nehemiah Kauffman. This out of the mouth of a sitting at the time Las Vegas Justice Court judge. She never elaborated any further on that. So this folks, is what we've been working on.
Puzzles me, Doug. I mean, first and foremost, if you're going to speak and come out with allegations, and I use that word allegedly very loosely with certain people in certain positions, because they showed me what their valor and what their word is, their credibility, it's nothing. I don't understand if you're going to go that far to say it's supposed to be her and her daughter, and that it was a mistake about our children, but then she doesn't want to elaborate any further. Like, I mean, honestly, like what kind of moral fiber being do you have in your body? Please tell me, because as I see it, you're blessed to be walking around. You and your daughter are very blessed to be walking around with breath in your body as we speak. But to make these allegations, and like I said, I use that term very loosely because I said, everybody wants to tell half truths. They don't want to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Right.
They just want to give you halves and then blow a smoke screen up Connie and I's ass, so we just go away because we're the proverbial grieving mothers. I have a big problem with it. This cold case stinks from head to fucking toe, and it hasn't been adding up since day motherfucking one. Because, and riddle me this, why did it take them 48 hours to process the crime scene? Why did it take you guys 2 days?
Well, I can let me say something to that on to stick up for their side. A double homicide crime scene can take that long because you're talking about everything in that, and I'm going to say something too on this. Everything in that apartment, you have two people found dead. There, you have blood. Like I said, you got all this evidence. You got fibers on the ground. You got all this stuff. So 2 days is not uncommon for them to be on scene at a double homicide. So I give them that. And I do want to say one thing. I've been blasting both Dorsch and Grimmett and the sergeant, but I want to say something. And I said this, hang on a second, I want us to get this out, Alethea. I said this in the stories I've written for the Baltimore Post-Examiner and on my podcast. Homicide Detective Mitchell Dorsch, okay? Yeah. He did go back after the murders. When he went into the evidence room, after they found out from people talking to them from my investigation that Shane Valentine had shot into the house 2 or 3 weeks prior, and he's now #1 suspect, Detective Dorsch went into the evidence room thinking that the bullet or bullets would have been in evidence. And when he went into the evidence room, he only found the rock that Shane Valentine threw at the house and pieces of the vehicle, Shane Valentine's rental car, that fell off when he rammed the garage door. The bullet was not in there. Now, to his credit, and I said this before, he did go back with the crime scene analyst, Alethea, and you told me that the other day on the 29th, and did retrieve the bullets out of the ceiling. But by that point also, and I said this before, even if those bullets had matched any other weapon that would be associated with this murder, and obviously, I can't say obviously because there's so much cover-ups in this case. Who knows who's telling the truth and who isn't? But the chain of custody was lost when they left your house for 2 or 3 weeks and left that bullet in there. The crime scene analyst, her name was Gabrielle Guerrero, on October 8th, because if anybody was ever arrested for this case, any attorney would have a field day. They would say, well, how do you know somebody didn't go in the attic and place the bullet in there or change bullets or whatever? So it's stuff that happened even before the murders on October 8th is, again, it's very troubling. And then we have...
John, can I ask you a really quick question before? I'm just really curious because since you know the crime scene analyst that didn't retrieve the bullet that day, could you possibly tell me the lead detective on October the 8th that came out to investigate my home?
I know his name. I don't know off the top of my head because I obtained the police reports that he was a patrol detective. And basically what a patrol detective is like a general assignment detective. When they get the first call, they're the first one there. But it was a patrol detective, and I do have his name in the report. I have the actual report. And then Guerrero, who was the crime scene analyst. But there's nothing in that report that says they did not take the bullet out. And that's what's troubling to me. And I'm going to tell you this. I've spoken to... I've speak to cops all over the country, and they said this case is up, it's abhorrent. But I've spoken to members of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, high-ranking members, who told me that was bullshit. that crime scene analyst violated their own department policies for whatever reason, whether they told you told me they said there was too much insulation in the attic. That is even more bullshit because
They couldn't get to it and retrieve it.
that's nonsense. Because I was just told a couple of weeks ago, so people know that if they have to go into a building, the crime scene analyst, and they remove structural beams, when they do that, they have a company, a construction company, a licensed contractor that's contracted by Metro to go in and assist the crime scene analysts if they have to take out structural parts of a house. They do not leave. Listen to what I'm saying, folks. They do not leave a bullet fired into a house or any crime scene and walk away and forget about it. Because what people have to understand is this, and this pisses me off.
Yeah.
If Neo and Sydney were not killed, and their bodies were, of course, they weren't killed. They wouldn't have been found on October 27th. That bullet and bullets would have still been in that house to this day. And that is a freaking disgrace. Now, it's been alleged, Judge Tobiasen alleged, that the reason why they didn't take the bullet out is that they knew Shane Valentine was the suspect and they were protecting him. That's in essence what she said. That's what Judge Tobiasen said. That is also another troubling comment because I'm going to say this, ladies and gentlemen, I said it before the other day. Shane Valentine, he is a convicted felon with a long criminal history, but he's never been arrested for sex trafficking or pandering or any prostitution pimping charges, and he's been pimping out, listen, people in this community, because Sheriff Lombardo is running for governor, and his undersheriff, who was involved in all the cover-ups with him, according to what police officers told me over the years, Kevin McMahill, is running for Clark County Sheriff this year, okay? These two guys are the head, number one and number two in the police department. And they are responsible for the mishaps, the negligence, and the incompetence in this case. It falls back to them because somebody should have had the balls inside the police department to say, wait a minute, heads need to roll. Somebody fucked up on October 8th, and why today is that crime scene analyst, Gabriel Guerrero, a senior crime scene analyst, okay? That, I'm telling you, cops have told me, Doug, that is freaking nonsense. They will not leave a bullet. That is the single most piece of evidence. The most important piece of evidence is a bullet that could link a suspect found with the firearm to the bullets, because it goes into the system I talked about the other day called NIBIN. Just like you said, Alethea, they have the National DNA Database, that anybody who's arrested for a crime goes to prison, they take DNA, and it goes into that database. So it's very possible that DNA evidence that's found at a crime scene may be to somebody who was already arrested, and it'll be linked to them. Now, of course, if you're never arrested, they're not going to have the DNA. But you analyze all that because you keep it. Because if you have a suspect later on, and he turns out to have been in the house or to the murders, then you already have to analyze all the other evidence, and it will become a match. So for them to say they only analyzed 10 pieces of DNA evidence is the most absurd. I mean, there's no words for me to say on that. And it's not only Doug Poppa, people.
It's mind-blowing. I mean, just imagine how I felt listening to that bullshit, being said to my face. And I'm just was floored because I'm like, look, I've done a lot of research myself on how murder cases and try to, see how things work and how things go. And I'm looking at them like this is negligence. It's got negligence written all over. And like I told Dosh and Fletcher, I said, you know what? If due diligence was done on October 8th and people did their job and that investigation was handled properly and not closed by the next day or the second day, after October the 8th, and they would have done their due diligence, I said, gentlemen, there's a possibility that I wouldn't be sitting here and having to meet you, ever. Me and Connie wouldn't have to deal with y'all, have to be in here or go through this. If due diligence, there's a possibility that we would have never met you or not these circumstances, not not
Right.
this way.
Right. I want to say something because I forgot to say what I was saying before about Joe Lombardo and McMahill, the two people running for political offices this year. Hey guys, let me ask you a question because I said this before. Because they do not take my questions. Matter of fact, they've banned me from their Facebook pages because they don't like the links that I put on to my podcast. So they're two cowards. They're two cowards.
Lombardo and whatever is McMuffin, whatever the hell his name is. They don't like you?
They don't like you? You got banned on Facebook? You?
Yeah. Okay. Listen, ladies. You're right. That's exactly what happened. But let me say this. I want to get back. Hang on. I want to get back to Shane Valentine. Okay. Long criminal history in Clark County in Las Vegas, Nevada. Okay. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, to this. And I said this. I've been saying this for years. Shane Valentine has been pimping out the daughters of Las Vegas residents for years, including when they were in high school, including, ladies and gentlemen, okay, the daughters of judges and police officers. Now, how the fuck is this piece of shit never been arrested for sex trafficking or pandering for decades? This guy's almost 30 years old. Listen. Hang on a second. I want the community in Las Vegas to listen to this. He's been pimping out daughters of the residents of Clark County, Nevada for years, and not once has ever been arrested or charged for sex trafficking. What does that tell you? What does that tell you?
That says that he is on the payroll, okay, and he's greasing somebody's palms, and there's a chain of command and everything. So he gives a little bit of information and gives them whatever little tidbits or whatever. Like my son had him dead to rights. You talk to the cops.
Neo said in the text messages, the Cellubrite, the conversations before Shane went over and shot into the house. Neo said, everybody knows you're a snitch.
Yep. I did a story on that for the Baltimore Post-Examiner, and it was titled, and another thing, while you're on that, Connie, Lethea, I also wrote a story, and I've told about it many times, that after the murders, listen to this, ladies and gentlemen, Allie Bowden, the daughter of Ty Bowden, who we discussed earlier, that Judge Shabiason made those allegations against, she put out a text message that I published to a friend and said that her father wanted to kill Shane Valentine and spend the rest of his life in jail. Now, she's talking about her father, who's a police officer. My question is this. Why would Ty Bowden, her father, want to kill Shane Valentine? Okay? She also talked about, she obviously knew Neo in those text messages. She knew Sydney. She talked about them, but that's what she said. My father wants to kill Shane Valentine and spend the rest of his life in jail. So that is also troubling to me. I do not know, okay, who killed Sidney Land and Nehemiah Kauffman, but I have a whole list of people who may have had the motive to do it, and that includes Shane Valentine. That includes Dominique Thompson, Frankie Zappia. I have to put Ty Bowden on my list because if I'm a cop and I'm sitting at a meeting listening with some vice detectives and we don't know the actual content of that meeting, but we do know what Judge Tobiason told me on the record, what Vice Detective Bill Van Cleef told her, is that they told her that Judge Tobiason said, you're a prostitute, you know about child prostitution and blah, blah, blah. So he would be on a list. Any professional investigator would put all these people on a list until they are cleared. And I don't know, maybe the police cleared him or maybe they didn't. But I'm saying he's on the list with many other people. And I want to say this also, okay? Oh, hang on a second. Let me say this because I want to get this out, okay? I said in many podcasts, and I talk to a lot of cops, people who ran homicide divisions. I spoke to a very well-known, nationally known homicide investigator that spent years and years on a major police department. And he reviewed my podcast and the Baltimore Post-Examiner stories. And when I talked to him, he told me he had almost 8 pages of a yellow pad that the stuff was just unbelievable to him. Not only their investigative techniques that they failed to do correct crime scene preservation, but he said, I have 7.5 pages. So when I talk, people, I am a former criminal investigator, okay? But I've been out of police work for 30 years, so I give my insight based on what I know from when I was a cop. But I also talk to current and former law enforcement officers to say, hey, am I wrong in the way that I'm thinking? Maybe you have a different perspective. And they've all told me, anybody that listened to these podcasts or read my stories for the Baltimore Post-Examiner, that there is something wrong in this case. And now we know at least 50% what was wrong was they botched the crime scene and all that stuff that they did, which was negligence, and they kept that covered up from you. Sheriff Lombardo kept that covered up from you for 5 years, both of your families, that crime scene was botched. These are other police officers who talk to me and come up with the same conclusion that I do. Okay, I'm going to stop. You guys, you ladies, say whatever you want to say.
You know, the police have lied right out of the gate. And I appreciate that Alethea is, now in a place that she can come forward. And, over 5 years, man, I went to battle. And I didn't give a fuck who I pissed off. I didn't give a fuck. I just needed to get to the truth. And people organically and all I wanted to know was the truth. I didn't have a preconceived idea of who did it. I didn't know, but I knew right out of the gate there was something wrong. And go figure, 5 years later, we've got everything that I had said and everything that I believed has now been proven. And what's interesting is Dosh would talk to me, Grimmett would talk to Alethea. They pitted the families against each other. They'd tell her one thing, tell me one thing. And it's interesting that, just think about it, Doug. You haven't spoken to Alethea. She has 5 years of communication with Grimmett that we really don't know a lot about. And so what's been interesting is collectively talking and sharing information and how the pieces of the puzzle are coming together. They're fitting, and it's more disturbing and more disgusting than what we even thought. And it's just, the police should be scared. They should be scared to death. They should be absolutely petrified, wondering what we're going to uncover with what we know and putting pieces together, because running my mouth for the past 5 years and what I believed was happening, we really didn't have a clear idea. We knew it was bad, and we knew that there were things that were bad, and we were finding out and reaffirming and confirming what we knew.
Right.
But now Alethea coming forward, she's bringing stuff that we believed and now we know because the police were telling her these things. And it's so disgusting on every level. And I can tell you, Lombardo, you're a fucking piece of shit. That's what you are, Sheriff Lombardo. Fuck you. I would love to have you sit in our shoes for even 1 second. And the captains and the lieutenants and everybody up that chain of command that watched the video at Crime Watch Daily, knowing that the DNA in that crime scene case had been botched, they used our efforts to get this story out nationwide. They used that as their out for Grimmett, that little minion piece of shit, running his mouth. Oh, I don't know, real intelligent guy. Man, I don't know what was supposed to be there and what was what and what wasn't supposed to be there, and there were cigarette butts and ashtrays and, the DNA was a mess. That was the police department's way out. They knew they fucked up the crime scene. They didn't want to spend any money on doing any testing on any of the DNA because they know that it was messed up. So it makes perfect sense. If they gathered a bunch of stuff and they only tested 10 pieces, it was botched. And here's the thing, Doug, and you know this. It had to go up the chain of command. You have the text messages that I had with Dosh. Don't air the story unless if it's going to hurt the case.
Connie.
Dosh said, we're not going to air the story unless we see the story and it's approved. And it went up the chain of command, up to Lombardo. They knew. You're going to show a picture of my daughter's body? You're going to show a picture of her body somewhat blotched out? And you didn't have the balls to tell me? I get phone calls from people back east going, don't watch the show. I'm like, what are you talking about? They go, her body's there. I'm like, what? Her body's on the video? You're going to show pictures of my daughter's body on national television in an open case? And then you talk about DNA? Give me a break. Give me a break. And then you turn around and you lie when we said this is nothing but lies, cover up, corruption, negligence. They used our families. They used our kids' bodies. They used the DNA because they were incompetent and they fucked up. I'm livid. And guess what? Right after Alethea, I knew back in September that Alethea had gone, and I emailed I emailed Fletcher, Michael Fletcher, Sergeant Fletcher, Dosh. Hey, I understand that you sat down with Alethea Kauffman. We'd like to do the same.
Right.
Of course, they have me corralled, and they don't like me at all, and so they don't let me talk to Dosh. They don't let me talk to Grimmett. I have to go to Sergeant Fletcher. How pathetic is that? The babysitter, to try to control me. And, and of course, I haven't gotten any emails back.
Here's what you do, Connie. Connie, I don't mean to cut you off. I'm going to let you continue. I want to say something. None of this surprises me, because when you have leaders, and I can't call them leaders because they don't have any leadership qualities. Sheriff Joe Lombardo is a documented liar, and I've proved that in many podcasts and many stories I wrote. So is his former undersheriff, Kevin McMahill. They're documented liars, okay? And they're running for political office, and they may get in. To me, it makes no difference, because as far as I'm concerned, I don't like any politician, okay? None of them have any integrity. But Sheriff Lombardo and Kevin McMahill are documented liars. So when they continue to cover things up, and I've exposed a lot of cover-ups over the years within this police department that came through me, through police sources, is when the people at the bottom, the rank and file, see supervisors and brass at the top lying and cover things up. They say, well, I'll probably do the same thing, because if it's okay for them to do it, then maybe I can do it also. And it's not, okay? You throw your integrity out the door. You might as well take that badge that's on your chest and throw it in the trash, because you just tarnished it and spit on every good cop that's given his life on the job as a police officer, because you allow this to go on consistently, go on in this police department. It goes on. I'm worried about here. I'm talking about this police department, the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, consistently over the years. Now, Connie, I'm going to do a separate podcast, so we don't have to get into it now, on that whole thing of why they went on Crime Watch Daily and didn't want to go, and all those messages and stuff that I have will be coming out in another podcast. And I want to say this here, okay? What Internal Affairs Detective Wes Williams told you, and when I did that story for the Baltimore Post-Examiner, and I talked about this in the last couple of podcasts, that Grimmett, what he told you, didn't violate policy when he gave confidential information to a judge, and then what Sergeant Fletcher told you about there was no conflict of interest when Grimmett stayed on the case because his daughter had a prior involvement with Shane Valentine, and I still want to get into that, as what exactly was that prior relationship, and when did it happen? It makes no difference. He should not have been on the case. Okay, This is what they told you, Connie, and I want you to listen to this, okay? I have information from police officers in the Las Vegas Police Department, and this is going to be in a separate podcast, that is going to prove, and even though we know that they're full of shit, okay, both of those two guys, the Internal Affairs, Williams and Sergeant Fletcher, that there have been other cases on Metro, and I'm going to name them, that show that Fletcher and Williams lied to you, because there were conflicts of interest in other criminal investigations that they had to pull detectives investigating the case away from, because they had an association with the cop under investigation. And then the same thing with the Internal Affairs investigation, okay? Wes Williams investigates policy violations. He doesn't do criminal investigations. That's a different branch of the Internal Affairs, and criminal intelligence gets involved. But he does policy violations. And for him to tell you that Grimmett didn't violate policy when he compromised a double homicide crime scene by leaking information to Judge Tobiasen, that is a bunch of BS. And I'm going to bring this out in a separate podcast, because
didn't Grimmett work in Internal Affairs?
Yes, he did. He worked internal affairs.
How can
Yeah.
How convenient.
And first of all, I want people to know this. I didn't mention this, but at the time of the Land Kauffman murders, Detective Dorsch, Homicide Dorsch, only had less than 2 years experience. Prior to that, he was in the Force Investigation Team. Detective Grimmett only had about a month of experience when he started working with Dorsch in Homicide. So they don't have a lot of tenure, and the reason for that is years ago, a lot of the experience, and I knew quite a few of them who were really good homicide detectives, they all retired. They had 20, 25 years, on the department, many years in homicide. They all retired, so they had to put other people in. And the problem we have now with the police department is some of the people in homicide are complete screw-ups. And I talked about, and I'm not getting into the rant now, but I talked about it, I'm talking about another podcast, that actually botched murder investigations, arrested the wrong people, and there's another one I just found out about a month ago that I'll be talking about that. So this is all troubling. But getting back to the murders of Sidney Land and Nehemiah Kauffman, 5 years unsolved, and I hate to say it, any case can be solved because it makes no difference what Neo and Sidney may or may not have been involved in. Two people are dead. Somebody or more than one person put a bullet in each one of their heads, and they are still walking around free thanks to the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department Homicide Bureau. And this goes all the way up to not only Sheriff Lombardo, but his number 2 man of operations, then Undersheriff Kevin McMahill. It's a freaking disgrace. And I've got calls from cops who've listened to these podcasts, Connie, and listened to you and listened to Alethea and said that, they're in tears. Okay. But, there's nothing, there's no words I can say. I get so annoyed when I see this type of stuff going on because it's a disgrace. Anyway, go ahead.
I don't think that one thing that they underestimated. They didn't Metro when our children were found on October 27, 2016. They didn't expect our children's murders to go nationally and worldwide to be publicized. That I don't think that they thought that it was that it was gonna go as big as it did and be a high profile case out the gate. I think that's one thing they underestimated. Another thing I think they underestimated, you guys fucked up from day one when our children were found, because there's no way in hell that scene should have ever been compromised or the integrity or disturbed or anything, and that only certain amount of people that need to be in there are only designated to be in there, first and foremost. I really don't think that they really underestimated, they looked at Connie and I as the proverbial grieving mothers. And so I'm just going to tell them whatever they want to hear. Maybe that'll appease them and they'll just go away. And, because they fucked up since day one. So, of course, you don't want the two mothers getting together and the two families getting together and poking around in your investigation, because it's like, oh, wait a minute, because you guys knew that it was fucked up from day one. And I have a problem with that because they underestimated us. And now it's just like, no, we're not going for the bullshit. We're not going to go another year of having to sit here and on a wing and a prayer, hope that somebody, will wake up and have a come to Jesus moment and actually, do the right thing, come forward. Obviously, that's been proven that there's people out there don't even have that moral fiber in their, not even in their little pinky toe, about doing the right thing. They wouldn't even know do the right thing if it came up and knocked them up, bopped them upside the head. And that's really real. And the sad gravity in the situation is Connie and I are sit here to try to pick up the pieces the best way we know how.
Here's what I want to say something because I think these, I'm 67 years old. Things pop in my head. They pop out if I don't write them down real quick. Listen, Ray Spencer is the lieutenant in the Homicide Bureau. He's been in there since 2018.
Yes.
And he's retiring or is getting ready to retire or retired recently. And he's running for, listen to what I'm saying, ladies. He's running for Las Vegas City Council. He has a Facebook page, okay? He's running on his record. So if I were you, and I can't tell you what to do, and you're not getting any answers from them over at Metro in Homicide, I would start asking him questions on his Facebook page, because he was the lieutenant in Homicide for years during this investigation, not when it originally started, but afterwards. And listen to what I'm telling you. And if he blocks you, I want to know about it, because I will do a podcast on that. Because I'm getting back to Lombardo and Undersheriff, okay? Blocking a journalist because you don't like what my links say, because I'm trying to get comments from them, because they refuse to comment through Metro, to go on the record. So their answers to that is to block me from their Facebook pages for God knows reason. And another thing I want to say too, and I post all the links to my stories on all the news media outlets, the television stations, the Sun, the Journal, the papers. But over a year ago, News 3 Las Vegas banned me from posting my links on their Facebook page. And I called up and I complained, and I says, I'm an independent investigative journalist. Why am I blocked from posting my links? I do not understand that. You are a news outlet that's licensed by the FCC, and I'm providing information that the community needs to know about. So their answers on News 3 is to block me. But for two people who are running for political office this year, McMahill and Lombardo, to block a independent investigative journalist because they don't want people to see the links to my podcast is a freaking disgrace. Then you know what, guys? I've been asking for sit-down interviews with you, both of you, for years, because I want to know. And I want to know, Kevin McMahill, I want to know about the 1995 incident when you and another officer asked a woman to expose her vagina, and the other cop put crack cocaine in her mouth, and you stood by and did absolutely nothing, and you were both brought up on charges. The other guy lost his job, and you didn't. I want that answered, because that's coming out in a separate podcast. I want you to address that, because that is a freaking disgrace.
Yep. He ain't going to address that. He doesn't even want to touch that with a 100-foot pole. I'm trying to, absolutely not. No. That's what I'm saying. Like, no.
This is the leadership, Alethea and Connie. This is the, hang on, Alethea and Connie, listen to what I'm saying. This is the leadership of the law, and I hate to use that word because they're not leaders, of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, along with other sheriffs over the years who've covered up crimes, cover-ups with other top-ranking police officials, and they consistently get away with it. And that's why it continues to happen. The best thing that could happen, and I don't care who gets elected or not, because I don't trust any politician, is that Kevin McMahill never makes to the election of sheriff, because he is a documented liar and nothing is going to change in the police department. So, and the same thing with Sheriff Lombardo. This guy's got the nerve to think he can run the state of Nevada when the worst mass shooting in modern American history occurred on his watch, and they didn't take measures beforehand that could have alleviated a lot of those threats, including forgetting about training exercises that I exposed, that the local Las Vegas media still completely ignore. 58 people died, and over 400 were shot by Paddock, and they got the nerve to come out after they released their after-action report on it and say, basically, we screwed up. They didn't even have a mass casualty incident plan in place prior to the massacre, but we know we screwed up, and now we're putting things in place. And this guy, Lombardo, wants to be the governor of Las Vegas. He is a freaking joke. He is a joke, okay? But it's all about money in this state and in this county. The casinos that back these people up to office, it's all political stuff, you know. Hey.
It's all who they know, too. to get into certain positions. I mean, honestly, if you really think about it, ladies and gentlemen, in Las Vegas, it's basically, who you know. And if you know the right people and can move in certain ways, you know what I'm saying? It can benefit you, whether it's politically, politics, or the casinos, or I'm just saying, like, networking. It's all on who you know.
We're coming up to an hour, and my podcast can go over an hour. It's my podcast. People don't want to live. If you don't, people, I get the hate mail, okay, and I get a lot of good mail based on my podcast. Listen, people, if you don't like what I say and what I report, then don't listen to it, because I can give a flying fuck whether anybody likes what I'm talking about or not. I want to go back to them telling you that releasing information to a third party is okay. That's what they told you, Connie, when you talked to them about Grimmett, and that is a lie. I got another podcast coming out on this too. There was a guy years ago, and listen up, Sheriff Lombardo, because you know exactly who I'm talking about, and this is all going to come out. Okay, he's now retired from the police department. Okay, they went after this guy because there was a fire, a forest fire or something, many years ago. Not that many years ago, but years ago. And long story short, he made a comment to a citizen who asked him, how did this happen? And he made a comment allegedly that it was fireworks. Okay. And actually, they found out later on he didn't actually make the comment. Well, they went after this guy to retaliate against him, saying you released information to a civilian or another party about a criminal investigation, a crime that happened. They went after him. He ended up retiring from the department. But the reason why they went after this guy, and I've been working on this for over a year, is because they didn't like him speaking out against Sheriff Lombardo's buddy that used to work with him in narcotics, who was working on county time with Sheriff Lombardo's approval to work on Sheriff Lombardo's off-road vehicles because he's involved in off-road racing. So they targeted this guy, and so did the Criminal Intelligence Unit, because he was making too much talk about why is this guy not showing up working when he's working on county time, working on Sheriff Lombardo's vehicles. And there's a whole story to this, people. It's huge. I will be exposing that in the future, and many other cover-ups that Sheriff Lombardo and Kevin McMahill have kept from the public and the media. Two cops told me just recently, a couple of months ago, that the Public Information Office, which is basically the cover for the sheriffs to protect the sheriffs, is been lying and blowing smoke up the ass of the Las Vegas media for years. Okay? Right. When I broke that story, and I know you people read it, about Sheriff Lombardo's cover-up that led to the rape and kidnapping of a little 12-year-old girl in 2019, I exposed that 2-year cover-up. Okay? Cops have told me that I think it was Fox 5 that could have had this broken in 2019, but they still didn't push. They asked a question about the SWAT team or something. They took what the PIO told them, and they just left and forgot about it. And that is not what you do as a journalist, because you're supposed to report to the community, and you're supposed to dig deeper and say, well, there's something wrong with this, people, because I'm talking about the little girl that got raped. Is how did the suspect end up going from McCarran Airport? And I exposed this, so it's not a secret. I exposed this in my podcast. But if they would have asked the right questions that night and say, Public Information Office, I think it was Fox 5 that did, but they just took the bullshit answer. How did the suspect, who was working in McCarran Airport, end up in North Las Vegas, and the SWAT team went out and got him out of the house? How did he go from McCarran Airport to North Las Vegas when you guys said on your press release that his vehicle was found at McCarran Airport? So how did he go from McCarran Airport to Nevada? And if they would have asked the right questions and pushed, they would have done and exposed what I did, is that he stole a McCarran Airport vehicle when they tried to arrest him, and they had a high-speed chase, and they lost him, and that was covered up by Sheriff Lombardo. So this is what the news people do out in Las Vegas. Okay, they take an answer, and
It's
they
a wild, wild west,
For
man.
real.
Oh my gosh.
You can't make this up.
No, you can't make this stuff up.
I mean, really?
yeah,
Like,
it's a mess. But let's get back to there's nothing I could say. Listen, I know what it feels like to have somebody murdered in your family and the person's never brought to justice. My uncle was killed back in the 70s in Brooklyn, and it affected the whole family. It is. Unless it happens to you, you can't
Right.
say how it feels. So, my condolences again. And again, there's only one thing that matters in the Land Kauffman murders,
yes.
and that is that the scumbags who did this,
Mhm.
or scumbag, and I believe there's probably more than one, and I'm going to tell you why, are brought to justice. And it's another thing they use out here too, and I don't like what they do out here. Some police departments use this terminology of suspect and person of interest, and when you ask them about it, they say, well, a person of interest is like somebody that may have information about the murders, but a suspect is somebody we think did the murders. It's all bullshit, okay? If you're a suspect in a murder,
That's what you
you
are.
did it, you had knowledge of it before or after, you're still a freaking suspect, okay?
Right.
So all this terminology of person of interest, no, but maybe it's all bullshit, okay? There's
They give a shame. He's a person of interest, or he's a suspect. No, he's not. He's not a suspect. He's a suspect. No, he's not a suspect. Or he's a person of interest in the investigation. Well, which one is it, y'all?
do you know by them making those comments that
Right.
if indeed, and we don't know if he is, it could be somebody else that did these murders, but they're on those three people are on the top of my list, okay?
Yeah.
If indeed he was involved in these murders, and I say involved because there's a charge called accessory before the fact and accessory after the fact. So if you had knowledge that the murders were going to take place or indeed did take place and you don't come out with it, you could be charged. You are a suspect in the murders for all intents and purposes, even if you didn't pull the trigger. Okay? So that's
You're just as much as comparable as the person that actually pulled the trigger. You just as much as they held responsible for the cause of death, even if you didn't, because you're there.
do you know the field day? Let's just say this person is involved in the murders.
Yeah.
That an attorney would have with these detectives when they're on the stand as well. He was a suspect, you said. Then a year later, he's not a suspect. Then a year later, he is the suspect. Then the year later, the sheriff says he's still a suspect. Then in 2020, no, he's not a suspect person of interest. It's like, what the hell kind of investigation are you doing? Because one thing that we don't know, okay? And I want to know, why
public record.
Why did
about it?
Listen, why did Shane Valentine immediately after the murders flee to Southern California and turn off his cell phone and bought another one? And that's where he was arrested when they got the warrant for him for shooting into your house, Alethea, 2 weeks before. What did he do that for? That's another question in my thing. What's going on with that? Did he just flee because he just felt like fleeing for no reason? No, that he fled because he was involved or knew this was going to happen and was going to come back to him, so he fled. That is my opinion. I may be totally wrong on that in the future. But this is what I think as a criminal investigator. And then you have Frankie Zappia, who was the stepdaughter of a now retired, another police officer, Las Vegas Metro police officer, who was the last person outside of the murderers to see Sydney and Neo alive. That's another thing. Too many cops' kids surrounding this case.
But don't forget, Greg Flores is the Catholic godfather of Frankie, and he works in Vice and was involved in issuing the search warrants for an execution at her apartment. And he's worked on the case.
Yeah, he was a sponsor. Let's straighten that. According to Ariane Zappia, Frankie's half sister. Hang on a second. Let's get straight, okay? According to Ariane Zappia, who I interviewed on the record, and that's other stuff's come out in the podcast also, because now with these revelations that they told Alethea, all this stuff is going to be rehashing stuff, is that she said that Greg Flores was Frankie Zappia's sponsor at their confirmation, the Roman Catholic confirmation at the church right in Vegas, I believe when they were about 10 years old. So the question is, when they executed search warrants on the house and cars, the residence of Frankie Zappia and Dominique Thompson and his vehicles in April of 2018, which was authorized that I found out through text messages between Dorsch and you, that Dorsch was the one that wanted Vice to do it, so Homicide be out of it. Long story short, people, they executed search warrants on Dominique Thompson's residences and Frankie Zappia's residence over Turnberry Towers and Dominique Thompson's vehicle. And the person who executed that search warrant was Vice Detective Gregory Flores. Now, if Gregory Flores was indeed the sponsor to Frankie Zappia because he was friends with the family, in her confirmation, you have another conflict of interest because he's now going to do a search warrant, which the premise was is to get into these houses to see if they could find a weapon that was used in the murders. That's the whole premise of doing these search warrants, under the cover that it was a Vice investigation, because Dominique Thompson was Frankie Zappia's pimp at the time. Then you have a family associate of the suspect who's executing the search warrant. You could not make this shit up. This does not happen in other police departments. Regardless, Connie, if anybody from Internal Affairs or Mike Fletcher told you none of this stuff was a conflict of interest and people could talk about, it's another thing. People can go home and brag to their family about the details of a double homicide. That's all bullshit. That's all bullshit. Anyway, we're an hour and 10 minutes. I want to give Alethea a couple of minutes for your last remarks. We'll do this again, and then Connie Land after Alethea. Go ahead, Alethea. Say what you want to say.
I mean, honestly, like I said, this is going to be the year of revelations and what has been done in the dark and the negligence upon our kids' case and everything. It's going to bust wide open because this is big. This is really big. It's bigger than I don't think that we ever thought that we could possibly. I think maybe imagine that it could be this big.
No, definitely not.
No, especially looking back from 5 years when we first met, and we met 4 months
After.
exactly to the day our kids
4 months.
were gone. So that 5 years ago, and we never thought that it was going to be this problematic. I mean, there's no words for it, honestly. I mean, it's there's just no words. I don't know.
Go ahead, Connie. Take it. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're back on the record. You just heard from Alethea Kauffman, and we had a disconnect there for a minute. Connie Land and Alethea back on the line. Go ahead, Connie. Say what you want to say, and I'll give my closing thoughts after you talk. Go ahead.
You could never wish this on anyone. And I'll watch shows that are like murder shows or things, and I don't even associate myself as being a family, but I don't know how they even do it. And then I realize we are those families that are on the TV. And, there's always been a pursuit for justice and truth. And however justice happens, we talk about, for me, it's as important. I am determined to find who killed these kids. Mm-hmm. But on the same level, part of this journey and all of this uncovering, look at everything that we have uncovered about the Metropolitan Police Department and the people that have worked in this investigation. It's the most vile, disgusting thing. And I know if they've done it to us, they've done it to other families. These people have no business being investigators or detectives. If this is the way they handle these investigations, there's absolutely no business. And like I've said, the police, they hate you, Doug, and they hate me. And I really don't care. They work for me. My tax dollars pay for them to be doing the job. They should be answering my phone calls. They should be answering my text messages. They should be responding to my emails. And how childish and petty and bullshit games that they continue to play that they don't even respond. Who the hell do they think that they are? They are handling my daughter's case. If I have a question, I want an answer, Sergeant Fletcher. If I'm asking for a meeting request, then you know what? I don't care. Bring your stupid little attorneys in to make sure whatever you guys need to do to cover your asses that you've tried to do for 5 years, and sit down with me, sit down with the Kauffman family, so you can't play your little games You tell them one thing, you tell me one thing. I mean, you wouldn't even know what to do to put her and I together. But guess what? We would love to sit down together as parents of these kids and have you tell us what story. You wouldn't even know what to do. So they should be very scared. They should be very fearful about the information that's still coming forward. All the information that Alethea has kept quiet is all going to come out. You thought I stood alone, and Doug and I, and you and I have done our thing, but now we're not alone. And the voices are becoming louder. We're going to stand up, and we're going to be more, we're just never going to stop, Doug. You know that. You know that.
I know, and I don't blame you, Connie.
Yeah, they can't discredit. They can't call us grieving mothers. They can't say, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I can't imagine what you've gone through. I couldn't imagine being in your shoes." Right. Blah blah blah.
They have sleepless nights.
Yeah.
Well, no, we have sleepless nights.
We've got the sleepless nights.
Yeah.
So Doug, we're never going to stop.
No. And you shouldn't stop. You shouldn't stop until this case comes to a conclusion with the people or person responsible for these murders. You have both of you ladies, Alethea and Connie, have an absolute right to be angered, to be disgusted what's gone on in this case. And I want to say right now, they are upset with me because I started doing these stories on the Baltimore Post-Examiner, and had it not been for my interview with Judge Melanie Andrus Tobiasen in May of 2018, because I did not know anything about the murders of your daughter Connie and your son Nehemiah Alethea until I interviewed Judge Tobiasen, which was about police corruption, and people can listen to that in episode 39. It's totally unedited. And she brought up, that's when she started talking about the murders. And then it was because of that is when I reached out to you, Connie, which will be matter of fact, the 27th. I think this was 3 years ago this date, when I first reached out to you and said, I want to talk to you about the murders of your daughter and stuff. So, Sergeant Fletcher, on one of my conversations with him about 2 years ago, he made this comment to me because he was pissed off, and I thought it was, and other cops I've talked to believe the same way, is that he told me, he said, listen, we could say you did the murders, meaning me, because you wanted maybe to get fame because of a story and make money. And I went off on him when he said that. I said, really? A sergeant in homicide is telling a journalist or anybody that we can say you did the murders, set somebody up for the murders? Because had they done, and then he told me, we know all about you. We investigated you, meaning me. I said, you investigated me. We know all about what you did on the police department and why you lost your job and something like that. I said, really? Instead of working on homicides, you're investigating the journalist who's investigating the murders because of their incompetence. It was freaking unbelievable. And by the way, folks, when the Land Kauffman murders happened, had these ace investigators like Sergeant Fletcher, who's the sergeant homicide, had he done any investigation, he would have found out that in October of 2016, I was not in Las Vegas. I was staying with a Army buddy of mine and his girlfriend who had a stroke in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And if you would have investigated any further, Sergeant Fletcher, you would have found out that when I was writing these stories for the Baltimore Post-Examiner, it was an online news outlet, newspaper that's reader supported. I wasn't making hardly any money. I think in 5 years I worked for the wrote for the Baltimore Post-Examiner, made like $400. So you're wrong on that. You're wrong on that. We could say you did the murders because I wasn't even in this freaking town. And I wasn't making money on the stuff, and I don't need to do anything with fame. Are we still there? Are we offline again?
No, we're still here.
So I keep hearing these beeps. So that to me, that was just so totally unprofessional. But who cares? When you're a journalist, when you're doing investigations like this as an investigative journalist, you're going to get people who are going to hate you. It doesn't bother me, and everybody knows why I lost my job on the police department, because I testified against the criminal justice system, the prosecutor, the sheriff, two captains that had a guy in jail for years, was wrongfully convicted. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that, but I want to say this. I want to address, because this bothers me, District Attorney Steve Wilson.
Oh, he makes me sick.
Let me say what I have to say here, okay? District Attorney Steve Wilson, you're running for re-election. I know for a fact, because people talk to me, they listen to every one of my podcasts and read every one of my stories on the murders and everything else I've been doing. District Attorney Steve Wilson, it is your job not to be friends with Sheriff Lombardo or the police department. You have investigators assigned to your office. I don't know exactly what they do, but District Attorney Wilson, you should have held a special investigative grand jury years ago. That's what I would have done. And subpoena all these people surrounding this case. Judge Tobiasen, Ty Bowden, the vice detectives who outed Judge Tobiasen, Allie Bowden, all the people that you think have information on this case. But you know why you didn't do it, Wilson? Because you're a coward and you're afraid where it was going to lead. Because a grand jury can take the case anywhere they want to go with the right prosecutor. But you are to blame for this because you allowed this charade, this criminal justice charade, to go on for years when you have the power and authority to tell Sheriff Lombardo, I'm conducting our own investigation. We are going to hold a special grand jury. And Wilson, if you want to do that, call me up because I will give you pages of people that you should subpoena and get testimony under oath to find out just what the hell's going on in this case. Anyway, ladies, listen, we're about an hour and 15 minutes. We're going to do this again. Appreciate both of you coming on the show and getting this out because this is not going to get, it's only going to get worse, okay?
Doug, and be clear, and so everyone knows, the Kauffmans and Alethea and I stand united in our effort to find the truth. And I don't care how that truth plays out. We're going to get, and if it's uncovering police corruption and negligence and incompetence and all that, guess what? That's justice for our kids. That is justice for our kids. It's a different type of justice, but it's justice nonetheless. And we will continue to talk. We're going to continue to share information with you. And I want you to know, Doug, I know you have police officers that provide information to you. And I want those people, and I don't know who they are, but I want them to know how much, as parents, we appreciate you and them. I mean, I'm addressing them. Thank you for coming and sharing information and giving this information to Doug. You're filling in pieces and you're doing the right thing. And if you're a parent, to only imagine the hell that we live in. Thank you for sharing. And the police officers that are giving you this information, these stories are coming out and the truth is being exposed in ways that have never come out before because there's never been a media outlet that had the balls to do what you're doing, Doug, and to tell the truth, which the media, they're so skewed in what they there's always an agenda with them, but not with you. So I just have so much appreciation and feel such gratitude for these officers who are coming forward. I hope more feel the urgency and the need to provide more information to help us find some peace and some resolution for this murder so this doesn't happen to other people. And so that's what I can say. Alethea and I we're not going away. No. We're working together. Our families are united. We appreciate you, Doug. Always, always, for all you have done and continue to do to fight for our kids and our families. And I appreciate you and everything that you do.
I do too.
Yeah.
I know it took me 5 long years and, I just had to find my footing and, find my place as far as, finding out the truth. And now that I've seen everything for myself and heard it for myself, I'm going to do what is right, and that's like for Connie and I, like we live an unimaginable nightmare on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And if, we can bring light so this doesn't happen to any other families in the future, because it could be anybody's police daughter, as we've heard, police daughters, judges' daughters, anybody's kids can get caught up in anything. It can have death or and this kind of tragedy. Nobody's exempt.
Well, let me say
There's
something on that, Alethea.
Huh?
Let me say something on that. And I said this in the last podcast, and then we'll have to cut it down because it's about an hour and 15. I don't want people saying it's too long. If it's too long, they don't want to listen to it. Fine, turn it off. I could care less whether people listen to this or not. Thousands of people listen to this podcast. I see that on the results because it's strewn across all type of social media, the links on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Twitter. Of course, we got the YouTube video. It's the audio podcast on Spotify and iHeartRadio. The links are on Pinterest, Tumblr, Reddit. It goes on and on and on. But, let me say this. I feel for both of you ladies. And I appreciate you coming on the show. We're going to do this again. The United States Department of Justice, I've been calling out for help on the last couple of podcasts. You are the last resort. You're the ones that have the power to come into Las Vegas and investigate this police department, not only with the Land Kauffman murders, but stuff that's been going on around here for years. And there are police officers who will talk to a genuine investigation if they don't feel it's going to be a whitewash. So, that is out there. I don't have any control under the U.S. DOJ, but we're going to do this again. I feel so bad for both of you on the loss of your children. And like I say this all the time, there's been some ignorant people who've sent me some emails saying, well, they were involved in this and they were doing this and doing that. Listen, people, you're all assholes when you say that because you have no idea what you're talking about. It is the job of a police homicide detective to close cases, no matter who or what the victims were involved in. And that is your only job, is to get justice for the families and for the two people who were murdered in this case.
Hey, Doug, one last thing, and then I know you need to wrap it up. For everyone that listens, the thousands and thousands of people that listen to these podcasts and love them and comment, please support Doug. Please support his podcast. He spends hundreds of hours, thousands and thousands and thousands of hours have been spent. He doesn't make a penny doing any of this. And to have a real journalist writing truthful stories, seeking the truth. And I want people to support you, Doug. And I want people to help you to do the work that you need to do because your work is invaluable. And, $5, $10, whatever it is, it would be so immensely appreciated from us as the families. We would appreciate it. And so I want people to know that you're not making money doing this, and it's a complete service that you offer. And for our family and what you've provided our families is absolutely, you couldn't put a price tag on it.
I appreciate it. And people have to understand that, when you do this type of work, the investigations, you have to obtain court records. You have databases where you're doing checks on, and all that costs money. And and I have a PayPal, and very rarely anything ever gets in there. I think 2 years ago somebody threw something in there, but it does help because it will help me continue to do these investigations and pay for doing a better podcast. And people ask me, we want to see what you look like, and I've done one or two interviews, a couple of interviews on television I could see, but how come you only, even on your YouTube channel, you talk, you don't have any video? Well, the reason for that is it's for bandwidth. My internet connection is not all that great. For me to upgrade to a faster connection, of course, is going to be more money per month. And then, then you'll see my ugly face looking into the camera talking, but it's still my voice. It's still my voice.
You're silly, man.
We're being so good.
You're silly.
So silly.
No, I know it's still my. But people ask me all the time. These other podcasts, they get on and talk, and we actually see the person who's talking, and that's the reason why I do it. Is one, I don't really like looking at the cameras, but the biggest thing is it's a bandwidth problem, and over the internet. So if I was doing interviews with people like with Connie and Alethea, and we were doing the video Skype call, now we're on an audio Skype call. That's more bandwidth. and the bandwidth connection that I have is just not that fast enough where we start getting distortion and everything. So anyway, that's what it is. Hey, it's the word that gets out there, and hopefully there's there's people out there. And I know this without getting into any details, that this story is going to go national at some time in the future. I can almost guarantee you that, and then maybe that will lead to getting justice for the two families and finding out who exactly committed these murders, because that is the only thing that matters here, is to get these people or person that were involved in these murders brought to justice. And that is the goal. That's all I can say. Listen, Alethea Kauffman, mother of Nehemiah Kauffman, I appreciate it. Connie Land, your daughter Sydney Land, appreciate it. We'll talk again on other podcasts. There's so much more stuff we need to talk about. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's 17:21 hours. That's 5:21 p.m. from Las Vegas, Nevada. This is the Truth and Consequences podcast with Doug Poppa.